It's okay to be Appalachian and queer. Remember the mountains are here to lift up your feet, your soul they cannot beat. You were born here, all the same. You deserve to join the game like Paw Paw and sayin' y'all, you belong. So join us in this mountain song. From a bird in a cage to one that flies, one day you will touch the skies. For you, the mountains are here. It's okay to be Appalachian and queer. What are a few things that you can think of just off the top of your head that like are mountain culture or whatever?
I think it's mostly the nature. I live right outside of the city of Louisville, and I'm used to being surrounded by farms and forests. So I think, especially with Morehead State University being so small, I feel more at home. My county is very small, like one road in, one road out of the town, and Morehead is very much the same, and being just kind of secluded, surrounded by the forest and the mountains and down the valley.
So nature's very important to you.
Yes.
And you would say that's a big part of Kentucky.
I think so.
Specifically Appalachia, like the lush forests and beautifulness and everything. Okay, so have you lived in Appalachia your whole life?
I have not. I was not born in Lexington, but I was raised mostly in Lexington in that sort of not a city environment, but more of a citier environment, I suppose.
So, I have lived in Appalachia my whole life, specifically here in Morehead, which, I know, it's a sleepy little town. There's not a lot to do.
Yes, I am from Pikeville, Kentucky.
I am from Louisville, Kentucky, and most of my family is from northern Kentucky, but I have spent the past 5 years going to Morehead State, and I feel more at home in the mountains and in this region.
I have not actually moved here last year from northern Kentucky. I have lived here since about August of 2018, and I absolutely love it here.
Would you say there was a culture shock when you moved here?
Not initially, because the college environment feels much more different from like the out city environment. I spent most of my time on campus in the dorm, and everything I needed was sort of on campus, so I didn't really venture out except to get groceries and stuff like that. As I started spending more time outside of the city, a little bit, but mostly because in Lexington, the way I look and move and identify myself as isn't much of a problem. But coming into Morehead and Appalachia?
Appalachia.
Yeah. People just look at you a little bit different. It's a little bit more unusual for them. It's a little bit more unusual for me.
Somewhat.
What do you mean by that?
Sometimes it gets pretty hard being a transgender person and not always having people around me agree with my lifestyle.
I would say not. Like I said, I think you can find Appalachia culture no matter where you go in Kentucky. And so I've had friends, I've had family that have lived further east than Louisville, and they've kind of brought that culture back with them.
A little bit. I'm from roughly around Cincinnati, so it's a little bit more accepting and diverse where I'm from. But here, there is a lot more of this is how it is, and this is how it's going to be, and this is how it's always been. Like, we're not going to accept people who are different. And it's not everybody who's like that, but a lot of people are. And there's a lot more of that here than there has been in Cincinnati, where I'm from.
How would you say you've been treated overall by Appalachian culture?
Living in Pikeville, I was treated a lot differently than I am living in Moorhead. In Pikeville, people are a lot more closed-minded and not as friendly, I would say. But in Moorhead, it's a lot more accepting environment, and a lot more people respect me here.
Honestly, the treatment here hasn't been all that bad. I wouldn't say it's good either. It's been pretty neutral.
Here on campus, I haven't been treated that bad. It's actually been pretty decent. I also hang out mainly with LGBTQ individuals. But outside of campus, every now and then I'll get like weird stares, weird looks.
How do those make you feel?
I've gotten them my whole life, so it doesn't really. I'm like, oh, cool, somebody's staring at me again. I don't really care.
Well, I mean, obviously they bother you a little bit, like
A little bit, but not enough to like ruin my day.
But as far as being gender fluid, I am not out to my family. The friends that I am out to have, of course, been very open-minded and accepting, and they just see me as Shannon. Those that know that I prefer to go by they, them pronouns try their best. There are a few people that they aren't insensitive, they aren't insulting, they are just curious and they will ask questions, especially since they, them is not a, at least in our modern language, a typical singular pronoun for a singular person. And so they ask questions trying to be as sensitive as they can and making sure that I know and people in the room know that they aren't coming from like an insulting place. They just want to know more.
Great, honestly. Mostly because no one's ever actually like confronted me about anything like that. They just sort of like give me a look and move on with their life, and sure, I can do that. Campus-wise has been okay. There's some more restrictions in place on trans people that me and some of the professionals.
what are some of those restrictions?
Well, in order to live in a dorm that aligns with my gender identity, I do have to have my license has to be changed, which is a pretty big step that can't really happen until later. So I have had to live with women for most of my college career, which is fine, but it's also not. My last roommate was like, I am uncomfortable with you identifying as male and us living together, and I think we should live separately. And that was a little bit hurtful because I don't get it. I don't get what the problem is. But living with friends, it has been less of an issue because they know and they don't care. And then of course I live with my girlfriend now, and of course she absolutely doesn't care. So
That's beautiful. What has been your bad experiences?
As far as bad experiences, I think I mentioned it a little bit ago, but most of it was a mental state in the sense of convincing like friends, family, and like that they'd be understanding. And out of all of that, I only actually had one bad experience, which was with my mother, who still doesn't accept the fact that I am trans. She's hoping that I'll come out of it and that I'll decide not to go through with it, which it's probably a product of her generation. I'm not going to hold it against her.
Honestly, at first I don't realize why they're glaring at me, so I'm like, wow, they probably just had a really grumpy day. Maybe I'm talking too loud. I'll just quiet it down a little bit. Usually by the time I realize, oh, they probably just, like, I was wearing a shirt that said something along the lines as to my identity and something like that. They're like, oh, I get it now. Usually because I don't realize till afterwards, it doesn't really impact my day at all because I know I'll go back onto campus and I'll be safe there, and how they perceive me out there doesn't really matter while I'm in my little campus bubble.
it honestly sometimes makes existing as a whole really hard. Because whenever people treat you poorly, it sticks with you, not just whenever they say it, but even whenever you go home and you're alone and doing things, it still just comes to your mind. I start to feel the same way that other people say that they think about me, that like maybe I'm just confused, so I don't really understand, or I just need to find myself in different ways. So I start to question myself, but then ultimately I come back to reality and realize this is who I am, and that their opinion doesn't really matter as much as mine would.
Even after taking 10 years of martial arts, I am always afraid that someone is going to come after me for how I present myself, how I act, how I look, the people around me. That's because a lot of my friends aren't necessarily trying to conceal their queer identity, and like neither am I. But there are some people who I'm afraid will come after one of us, start a fight, start throwing punches, something like that.
As far as the sexuality goes, my family knows, but it's just kind of something that they kind of ignore as long as I don't bring home a woman.
What?
Well, I've never had a girlfriend that's lasted long enough to like get to that stage of time to bring them home to the family. It's always just been my boyfriends.
So,
And so,
because you're bi, they think you can pretend to be straight or whatever, and just like,
almost, yeah.
Would you like to tell your transition story?
When I was in like 8th grade, so I was like 13, I was like, oh wow, I'm not straight. I think I'm a bi woman. I was like, and that didn't feel right. So come the middle of freshman year, so I'm 14 at this point, I'm like, oh, I'm non-binary. And I stuck with the bi label almost the entirety of high school. And I stuck with non-binary throughout high school. But once I hit like senior year-ish, like, I think I might be binary trans. About 8 or so months after I came out fully, I was like, nah, I am not completely binary trans, so I still have a little bit of that in between.
So it's been a journey, like,
Yeah.
you've gone from...
I, at one point, identified as a whole lesbian. So that I've come very, very far in my identity process.
So have labels helped you or hindered you?
For a while they hindered me. I like stressed about what I wanted my labels to be. And then come probably junior, senior year of high school, I was like, we're just gonna go with the word queer because it covers all of my identities. And now I have probably a better understanding of what I was feeling. But I just kind of went as, if somebody asked me what my sexuality was, I'd be like, oh, I'm queer. And and that didn't necessarily go over too well with too many people because they're like, oh, that's a slip.
So
Not if you reclaim it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've reclaimed it?
Yeah. And a lack of family support definitely hinders me wanting to start medically transitioning. My family support, I figured it was going to be non-existent. And it pretty much is. I have friends back home who are really good, who I consider family. But my family just kind of ignores it. And I mean, I've known for years that this was what was going to happen. So I avoided coming out. But
there's not really much of a story to be told here. Like I said, it's a sleepy little town where not a lot happened. A lot of any problems I've ever had were just from me, honestly. When I say like problems that I've experienced from me, it's mostly just in the course of my transition. Any sort of problems I've had were just like convincing myself that I should give people a chance and that they're not going to judge me harshly. People have surprised me, they're not all that harsh. I've had a pretty pleasant experience, all things considered.
I'm not very far along in my transition due to some stuff at home. I came out at home at the beginning of my college career, mostly because I spent most of my life wondering what's wrong with me a little bit. For a while, I just thought I was ace. And then I realized that it wasn't.
What is ace?
Asexual is not being sexually attracted to other people. And there's various degrees on the spectrum of that. But more particular, I wasn't attracted to other people, and I didn't know why. And it turns out that's something very common amongst the trans community, is that you struggle to become attracted to other people when you're really uncomfortable with yourself. So I was really introverted. I was really quiet. I didn't like talking to people. And then I actually was reading a book, and one of the characters was trans, and I was like, God, that's just like how I am. Like,
so would you say representation is very important?
A little bit, yeah. That's an under-exaggeration. Yeah, I think it's incredibly important, because it certainly helped me figure out who I was. And all of a sudden, like, I was comfortable with myself now that I figured it out. Especially being able to represent myself on college in such a safe space. I'm certainly not introverted now. I like talking to people. It changed the whole way I interact with the world around me. Just being comfortable with myself did. Even in Lexington, the people I work with accepted me with ease. There was no trouble there. The only issues I've had with transitioning has been with my family. Which has been a struggle, which is why transitioning has been so slow. Not because my family thinks that being transgender is wrong, but more along the lines of they think I'm just very confused.
Would you like to talk about how that makes you feel?
It makes me feel pretty awful. It makes me feel like a child. It's a little bit disrespectful, I think, considering acknowledging who I am as a person. The fact that their response to me telling them one of the most important things that I've ever had to share emotionally with my family was that you're confused, you're just confusing sexual identity with gender identity, was incredibly hurtful. I mean, I don't want to talk to my family about important things because they think I'm just confused.
So you would say sexuality and gender are intersected, but definitely not the same thing?
Absolutely. And I think it's very important to know the distinction between them. It's not something my family has taken the time to understand. And they have a lot of ideas, like long-held myths that they believe in that are just not true.
Yeah.
That's something like a 5-minute Google search would fix. So it makes me feel very unimportant to my family that they would take such a strong and hard stance on an issue that makes me feel so much better. But in the end, they don't care enough about to actually educate themselves on before shutting me down. So
it started about sophomore year of high school. I went to a all-girls Catholic high school. About my sophomore year, I realized that I liked women. At the time, I was still very much a devout Catholic. And because of that, realizing I was gay, I thought God would hate me, and that I was going to hell, and I was a sinner, and all that horrible stuff. It sent me into like this downward spiral of anxiety and depression. And looking back on it now, it wasn't just because of my sexuality. I grew past it and realized that this isn't the type of God I believe in. My God wouldn't hate me because of the way he made me. If he'd really hated me being gay, if I was really damned for liking women, people say it's a choice. And because it's a choice and God gave us free will, that is why gays and lesbians are damned. However, since it's not a choice, and this is how God made me, and if God doesn't make mistakes, then how is this a bad thing? And so that's kind of, at the time, since I was still Catholic, that's how I grew past and became okay with myself. And as I grew, I learned and realized my own expression, and I realized that I didn't quite feel right as just being a woman. I had thoughts and feelings that I, through like the media and kind of the society, I was like taking in and was being influenced by. I liked male things. I felt more confident some days dressed as a man. And so for about a year in high school, I was identifying as a trans man to the only very close friends, and for a while they were only referring to me as a different name, like to them. I was Shane for a while, and they...
How did it make you feel when your friends would accept you and allow you to explore your, like in maybe one or two words, like the emotions you felt?
It made me feel free.
That's beautiful.
It made me feel like me. It felt right. I didn't feel like I had to hide myself or put on a facade and become a character that wasn't me and having to live day to day that way. And so when I realized, no, being a man isn't quite right, what about this when I first heard the term gender fluid?
Okay. As a child, I was always considered the tomboy that always played with boys' toys, always hung out with the boys. I never really had many friends that were girls, and my family just thought this was so weird and crazy, but they never thought much of it. And then as I got older, I noticed that I started not really going along with what society expects a woman or a girl to be like. And then I figured out what it meant to be bisexual. So then I came out as bi. And my whole family had a really big problem with it and accepting it. It caused a lot of emotional, physical turmoil and a lot of problems for me throughout my life. So I felt like it was just easier to say that I was just bisexual and lived out this life where my mother would force me to go on dates with men. I wasn't allowed to leave our house unless I was going to school or work, or if I could prove to her that I was going out with a man. And she would even get on my Facebook and pretend to be me and message these men to try to make sure that I was doing what she thought I was. And she provoked me very harshly to be straight, and I spent a lot of my younger years of life being punished and grounded and treated very poorly because of the way that I was, because even though my mother was never a religious person, she just always said that it was against God. And so she would follow through with that through even till today. But then, because of my lack of education of the LGBTQ plus community, I did not even know that it was a thing to be transgender. I didn't know what that meant. I hardly knew more than me being a lesbian or bisexual. And so whenever I came here, I started learning more, and my education just kind of furthered about the situation. I met multiple transgender people, and I was so fascinated by transgender people, people that were openly trans, someone who could identify as that and not even question themselves. So then I started realizing more and more that I felt very uncomfortable by people calling me she and her, or a girl, or a woman, or calling me my birth name, which obviously makes more sense now. And so then I decided that I was going to come out as transgender, but only to a few people I knew, so that I could see how that felt and how that helped me feel better. And it helped tremendously, to which the point of me now being openly transgender and only going by my preferred pronouns and preferred name. And I feel a lot better about myself now than I ever did previous.
What are your hopes for the future?
Future. Well, I hope to go through my transition, and that's already a given. But I'm also going to pharmacy school, so I'm hoping that pans out pretty well, and that I can secure a position in the field and, well, secure a healthy living for myself.
I guess being more comfortable and accepting in myself, finding ways to better my gender acceptance in myself, whether that's surgery or hormones. I have thought about going on testosterone to find almost like an equilibrium between being okay with having a feminine body but not feeling trapped and uncomfortable in it. As far as my hope for Appalachia in the future, I don't know. That's a tough question, because I think there's a lot of hope and a lot of change coming to Appalachia, and I hope it's all good. I definitely think the area as a whole could be a bit more open-minded and accepting, but also just in general, I want the economic situation to get better. I think if people didn't have to worry and struggle about their day-to-day things and the area wasn't so poverty-ridden, then people would get better. They would be happier.
I have hope because I feel like there are a lot of younger people that are starting to realize the way that people in Appalachia are, and maybe it can go back to the things like I mentioned before, like everybody just being an individual in themselves, being happy and being concentrated on their own lives and coming together as a community instead of hating each other for everything.
I hope that with the increasing diversity here in Appalachia, that more and more people become accepting, and then they teach their children to become more accepting. And it just kind of, it's not somewhere that people are scared to be. They're not afraid to go to Walmart holding their partner's hand or expressing themselves how they want to. That's probably one of my biggest hopes.
More representation would be one of them. Just so people like me don't spend up until their 20s trying to figure out the very basic of their identity. I think one of the big hopes that I have for Appalachia is that this isn't considered such a taboo and awful thing to be. Like I wish there was more of an understanding between me and her, because I love it here, the mountains, the air. I even love the people in the small home feel. It's just sometimes there's these stigmas that make it feel a little bit less homey, if you will. I'd like us to be more at ease with each other.
Beautiful. It's okay to be Appalachian and queer. Remember the mountains are here to lift up your feet, your soul they cannot beat. You were born here, all the same. You deserve to join the game like Paw Paw and Say and Y'all, you belong. So join us in this old mountain song. From a bird in a cage to one that flies, one day you will touch the skies. For you, the mountains are here. It's okay to be Appalachian and queer.